let's go. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth. Yeah, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And it's Black History Month, so it's a special Black History Month episode, and it's our Make Me Wanna Holla play, and it's going to be one of our Make Me Wanna Holla playlists. So it's going to be one of those episodes which is going to be on my playlist, all about the plight of Black people in North America, Britain, and topics in Africa. And who better to invite on than Dr. Jared Ball, or Professor Jared Ball of African American and African Diaspora Studies at Morgan State University at Baltimore, Maryland. He was once a correspondent for the Real News Network, and he does his own program, I Mix What I Like, and is a host on the superb Black Power Media, which anyone left-wing and anyone, of course, who is Black American or a Black person anywhere should follow Black Power Media, because like Black Agenda Report, it's news, commentary, and analysis from a Black left perspective. He's also the author of The Myth and Propaganda of the Black Buying Power. He's my guest on 1+1, so Dr. Ball, or Professor, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, and please, Jared is fine. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. And and again, it's an honor to have you. And before I get to my first official question, I have two unofficial questions I want to start off first, because it is Black History Month, celebrated in the U.S. and Canada. I just wanted your thoughts, however long or brief, on the legacy of two Black leftist journalists who sadly are no longer with us, Bruce Dixon and Glen of Black Agenda Report. And I just wanted your thoughts on their legacy. And of course them as people, because I know you based in the United States, you must have had many events which you've organized with Bruce Dixon and Glen Ford, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, in fact, I ended up doing more than that. I mean, going back to the early 2000s, I worked with did one or at least one or a couple of commentaries for Black Commentator when Glen was still there, and Bruce was still there, and Margaret Kimberly, I think, was there as well, or came just after, or I can't honestly remember the exact, but I was there, involved from very early on with Glen and Bruce in that work. And then when they moved to Black Agenda Report, I worked with them and helped in a very small way, but in a minor support role, helped them build that platform, and worked with them for a number of years until somewhere around like 2011 or 12. And then from then on, saw them intermittently here and there in similar spaces. So I on some level, I mean, I knew Glen and Bruce very well, and worked, and learned a lot from them, and still learn a lot from them. And it's two former Black Panther Party members, two people highly involved in journalism and media making and organizing on grassroots levels for a long time. Both of them were instrumental in being the early warning alert system, trying to inform us about the dangers of Barack Obama and what he did and did not represent.
Exactly.
So I mean, they're really irreplaceable, and I know it's cliche to say that, but people like that are actually, I mean, humanity will do its best to come up with other greats, and I'm sure we'll do so at some point on some level. But people like Bruce and Glen, with that kind of particular talent, skill, political analysis, and commitment to freedom and liberation for Black people and others, is kind of difficult to match or parallel. So they are, it was an honor to get to know and work with them while I did. And even when we didn't agree or had differences of opinion or views or whatever, again, the commitment and the quality of the work was undeniable. So,
Well, may they long rest in peace or rest in power, and may their may their brilliant legacy both on the racial and social justice fronts at home and their anti-imperialism. May that legacy long live on with with the work that we all try to do. So
Yeah, right on.
And then briefly, if you can, do you have any updates on the long quest to free Mumia Abu-Jamal and what's going on with him?
I'm far from the frontline expert on that, so I don't have any particular updates other than what we've been just trying to cover over the last, well, years really, but there's no immediate sign of release. As far as I'm aware, there's still a struggle to keep him well treated medically. But so rather than me struggle through an insufficient answer, I would just encourage your audience to go to places like prisonradio.org, to freedomarchives.org, to go to onamove.org. freemumia.com, I think, is also, but the New Jericho movement, I believe, we'll just search Jericho movement and go to their website for updates on Mumia and other political prisoners. And even if you go to Freedom Archives, I would encourage people to sign up for the prisoner newsletter that they have there. So you get automatic email updates about Mumia and all other political prisoners. And there still are, unfortunately, quite a few. And then you also get news about prisoners in general in this country and around the world. So as far as I know, I don't think there's been any major changes of late. Mumia is relatively, if I recall correctly, is stable health-wise, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But I don't have any particular new news, unfortunately.
No problem. All right, and now let's get to my to my first official question then. So my first question I wanted to ask you, since again it's Black History Month, and American society largely is only allowed to talk about Martin Luther King Jr., the cute, cuddly Gandhian figure who preached nonviolence, and are only allowed to study his "I Have a Dream" speech, and not his socialism, his anti-imperialism, his poor people's campaign, and the FBI war on him. And Malcolm X, is often, I think it's safe to say, he's often, given this kind of like black apple of the Black civil rights movement, and at least, many people accuse him of being, of having a reverse racist point of view. And I just wanted you to talk about the suppressed story of Malcolm X, and I'm particularly interested in his feminist views, his anti-imperialism, and his continuation of what Paul Robeson and W.E. Du Bois' "We Charge Genocide" campaign, because before he was murdered, he was traveling around the globe trying to get heads of states and the UN to take up the plight of Black Americans. And can you talk about that?
So sure. I mean, Malcolm was at the end of his life. He was constantly evolving, and we have to always be reminded, especially like I just turned 50 this year, and I'm just reminded that, or last year, I should say, and I have to be reminded that Malcolm was assassinated at 39.
It's hard to believe when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he was still evolving and looking to not only build his own analysis and organizations, but responding to, avoiding, handling the stress of, among other things, the surveillance of the state and the threats of the state. And of course, those encouraged, I think, by the state within the Nation of Islam. So he's dealing with this high stressful situation and trying to build the Organization of Afro-American Unity and the Muslim Mosque Incorporated organizations, and support, and build and not only support others, but as you mentioned, garner support from others from around the world for the Black struggle here in the United States. And, on that, so that's one way, in fact, that he was extending the work of Robeson and Du Bois, which, the point of their We Charge Genocide was to say, that we need the international community to support us here in the United States, if anything is to improve here. So Malcolm understood that, and within those organizations, he was also, to your point about feminism, he was looking to correct his own shortcomings on that issue, and in the movement in general, and elevate women, and encourage women to be elevated within the ranks of the OAAU, and to find new leadership roles within the struggle, and was again targeted because of not only that, but because his analysis was so broad and so militant. He was targeted for neutralization, is one of the words that the counterintelligence program used, or the precursor to whatever, in terms of name, what would become the COINTELPRO, that would be targeted at Black and other radical groups in this country. So, so just in general, what is often attempted to be suppressed in Malcolm and others from that time and today in their work are their tendencies towards anti-capitalism, Pan-Africanism, socialist, communist, politics, guerrilla warfare, all of these kinds of topics and issues that Malcolm was certainly engaging, have to be suppressed, as he is rebranded in today's world as somebody who would have maybe been a left-leaning Democrat, in the way they try to rebrand him, so that he couldn't, he can't be today what he was in his life, which was somebody who inspired people around the world to be much more radical and militant in again, their analysis and organization. So, yeah, I'll stop there. I don't want to just ramble on, but and we can come back. I can, but essentially that's where I see him as being when he was assassinated.
Then I have to ask this quick follow-up question before we get into the who killed Malcolm X. Then I have to ask this question, because I know you were actually fairly critical of the Spike Lee film on Malcolm X, and I just wanted to know what was your what was your criticism of that film, and in general, what's your criticism of how Malcolm X has been rebranded? Like, what's like how in general is Malcolm's image misused, apart from the the ridiculous notion of juxtaposing Obama's image with him and Martin Luther, with him and Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, I mean, the problem I had with Spike Lee's film is sort of indicative of the problem I have with how Malcolm is treated in general. That the film, if I remember correctly, it takes more than, I think, 90 minutes of that film before you see Malcolm as Malcolm X. So there's just all this focus on his youth and his criminal activity and the white girl and the drugs and the sensational. I mean, it's so silly. When, of course, what made him not only a threat to the powers that be, but an inspiration to millions of people around the world to this day was him as Malcolm X. And we don't get to see much of that. And then when we do get to see him as Malcolm X, all of, again, those radical politics are suppressed. So it becomes, again, what we're encouraged to see, this silly and I don't mean to be, that's probably too dismissive. It wasn't silly, but what was encouraged by the intervention of the state within the Nation of Islam, the internecine battle within the Nation of Islam, is all we're encouraged to see and focus on. So he got mad at Elijah. Elijah called, people within the nation got jealous and they wanted to target Malcolm and have him killed and da. Yeah, so that's all we're encouraged to see. And then, but of course, we're given almost nothing of his analytical mind, of the ideas he was working with. Again, we don't see him struggling to understand and then to incorporate and explain all of these radical ideas, again, that this country doesn't want anybody to engage. So, so by the way, For those who might remember at that time, I mean, it was announced in the press that Warner Brothers, who was producing the film for Spike Lee, said at the time, because they also owned the properties of, I think they had a Simpsons film and a Batman film coming out around that time, and they were saying that they wanted Malcolm X to be branded in society the way Batman and the Simpsons were. So they saw him as just another media product, another film. So how do you get white people to come in and pay to see a film about Black people, which is the only way to make a lot of money? Well, you have to have, again, the dancing and the sex and the drugs and the Black people killing each other. That's what white people will pay to see. And then you can throw in a little bit of Malcolm calling somebody a devil or a cracker, and then making fun of Dr. King or whatever. And then it's like, wow, I saw a movie about Malcolm X. And that's in general what's done. I mean, so we don't, and there's really good academic work done on this, that supports it with well-produced, well-organized and produced research. But the point is, media intentionally depicted Malcolm in a certain way. The state said that he had to be depicted in a certain way. And it continues to this day. So, again, a lot of people, back then and to this day argue with me and disagree with me when I say that, pop cultural references to our heroes doesn't help. And they always want to say, well, because at the time, if people of a certain age will remember that, when Spike's movie came out, everybody who wanted to believe it said, well, now we're going to see this resurgence of Malcolm in the consciousness of Black youth. All right, so more of us wore X hats and shirts and whatever, but that, for a while. And then what? And then what? And then what? Again, if the overall message is a weakened, watered down message, and it's not supported by constant messaging, because anybody, first of all, who studies communication or media studies or psychological warfare or advertising knows it's repetition that generates a certain public opinion and consciousness. So if you just throw a movie out there and then you go back to the business of usual of we never talk about these people, or if we talk about them at all, it's in some ridiculously narrow way, then of course it's not going to take hold and encourage people to study and build and become radicals and revolutionaries like them. That's not how it works. So, otherwise we would have had a revolution by now. Spike's movie came out in 1992. So, anyway, so that's what's done. And then there's a lot of skill and nuance put to it. We're encouraged to take advertising lightly, just in general. So many of us are not primed, I think, or prepared to really understand and recognize how damaging and incipient the messaging and propaganda is. But there's a lot of messaging that basically encourages people, Black in particular, hey, you can mention Malcolm. Obviously, he's too big to omit historically, but that's about it. And when your mind is meant, when you reference him in your mind, it's meant to be, oh yeah, he said some radical stuff, and then the other Muslims killed him.
Interesting. Interesting. And
I'm still listening. I'm right here.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you for that. And so then is it safe to say, because when I think back when I think about watching that film, I must have seen it 3 times, and when I think about that film, because just talking about Malcolm, I think of of a PBS documentary about Malcolm X. And if you watch this one PBS documentary on Malcolm X, basically that and Spike Lee's film, there's really no difference, because of course it talks about once upon a time Malcolm was a street hustler. Then he found his Black radicalism with the Nation of Islam, and then of course a lot of focus on the conflict between him and Elijah Muhammad. And then of course Malcolm X is murdered, and then of course before he's murdered he sees the lights that, oh, I shouldn't be a Black supremacist. All of us can get along with each other because he went to Mecca. Like, that's basically how Malcolm X is taught.
Yeah, and then of course they leave everything else out. That up until the end of his life, he was organizing guerrilla warfare groups. He was trying to build more militant links with grassroots organizations. He was an inspiration to every militant organization of that time and since then. he said of white folks, I mean, his whole point was, yeah, in Mecca, white people who adopt Islam recognize as a matter of fact that they are white. But in the United States, as he said, when a white man says he's white, he means boss. So he was clear that yeah, okay, not every white person is a devil per se, but that doesn't mean that capitalism is not a vampiric, devilish system. It doesn't mean that white supremacy has gone away. It doesn't mean that colonialism is over. And in fact, he said it was more like, okay, fine, I don't think white people are devils. Okay, great, but I'm still ready to get really, really busy to get rid of this white supremacy and imperialism and capitalism.
And of course, and of course, if they hit us, we have every right to punch back, more or less.
Absolutely. I mean, to I guess to their credit, I mean, that is one quote that Spike includes at the end of the movie, where Malcolm says, self-defense is not violence. But that's not, but that's cute and out of context. I mean, it sounds okay, but it's not an analysis. And what Malcolm was doing, even in his most fiery, hyperbolic speeches, he was offering an analysis based on research, data, based on a radical political education and orientation. He was, he was trying to inspire militant entrance into a global struggle by Black people here in the United States to start, and everywhere else, going forward. So I mean, honestly, it's just frustrating to see how he's reduced to sound bites and silly juxtaposed reference to some other figure or some other idea when there's no real exploration or encouragement to explore what he was actually trying to do or how he was trying to do it or what he was saying. I mean,
Please tell me you have a Please tell me you have a book about Malcolm X which I should go buy on Amazon, right?
I mean, I think there are a few. I mean, I think Baba Zach Kondo's book Conspiracies is still among the best. Peter Goldman's work from the 70s is still probably the best on the assassination in history. Bill Sales' work on the OAAU from the 90s is still fantastic. Carl Evans' work, all these people's work are still fantastic, but I often just say, I think people should just, go to YouTube and start by listening to Malcolm's speeches. I mean, it's just so obvious. There's not one full speech that you can watch and walk away from thinking that anything you've seen on TV is accurate. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just so clear. So, and that's why I think so much work is done to rebrand him, because, obviously I would want people to read our collection of essays criticizing Manning Marable's book. Ours is A Lie of Reinvention, Correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X. Please read that. But I mean, again, if you just listen to Malcolm and read his speeches in full, and I mean, you almost don't need anything else in terms of, what's about him other than, it's good to get, his speeches don't give you context or explanation about his history, his family background and stuff like that. But
a pretty good place to start, though. Start by actually listening to my personal favorite speech, the Ballads or the Bullets. And he was also, speaking of the late Bruce Dixon and Glen Ford, but he also was calling out what you and everyone else would sort of describe as the Black misleadership class of that period, whether it's the NAACP, Urban League, and so forth, and the whole NGOization of activism and revolution, right?
Yeah, and then the problem today, of course, is and it's beautifully done, as much as I hate it. That people that he would have helped us to see as that misleadership class can now claim him and can now claim to be doing his work. and then be given credit as extensions of his work. I mean, I can't remember. It was a couple of years ago. It kind of blew my mind. There was some photo essay campaign done where people like DeRay McKesson of Campaign Zero were depicted as modern day Malcolm X's and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, they should just be ashamed of themselves.
Unbelievable. So. And the last thing I wanted to talk about Malcolm X before we get to some of the other issues you mentioned is this. Now, answer possible, this question: who killed Malcolm X? Because if I'm not mistaken, all those accused, or some who even went to prison over his murder, have been exonerated. What's your view on that? And I'll just quickly give my perspective of the following. From what I understand, and this is sort of my own opinion, he was killed by the Nation of Islam for what he uncovered about Elijah Muhammad, him airing the elders' dirty laundry. The Nation of Islam did murder him. It could have been thwarted because the FBI was surveilling Malcolm, but the FBI more or less allowed him to be slain and did have one of their agents infiltrate the Nation of Islam, and one of their other undercover agents fired the last shots into Malcolm and prevented his wife and others from doing what was needed to be done to try to sustain his life. What's your response?
I mean, I think I largely agree. I mean, they did exonerate one posthumously, and another, in his own life. Malik Aziz was just released recently. And all have known for many years, despite people claiming in recent documentaries that they uncovered this. It's been written about for decades that William Bradley was the shotgunner, but who's now dead himself. But what remains, I think, unprovable to a fully, I guess, comfortable way is the extent to which the state was involved. So yeah, I mean, members of the nation may have been involved and may have pulled the trigger here and there, or fired the last shot. But it seems pretty clear that if they didn't fully orchestrate it, the state was so heavily involved in surveillance and manipulation, and certainly benefiting from his assassination, that that has to be understood. I mean, Zach Kondo's book Conspiracies does a lot of the great work that has only been plagiarized or copied or stolen from by others over the years, to lay out the context in which the state saw Malcolm as a threat to their foreign policy, and to the role that they needed Black people to play here domestically, and would have wanted him gone. He was described in the counterintelligence program as a threat and a martyr, and in documents before that, he was targeted as a threat. So I mean, so yeah, I mean, so we don't know for sure. We can't, but I think that it just has to be. It's just always interesting how, it seems like people who are put under the most surveillance by the state end up assassinated and nobody knows why. Same thing with Dr. King. I mean, there was so much surveillance of these people up until the moment of their death, and yet we don't know it. And then, of course, like both with Dr. King and Malcolm X, the first person to their shot bodies are undercover agents. Gene Roberts in Malcolm's case, and Merrill McCullough in King's case. So again, that's also suspicious. I've also heard, I'm by no means an expert on this, but I've seen people make the argument that, when Gene Roberts rushed to Malcolm's body, he performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, which people apparently with greater expertise certainly than I have on the subject say is known to be an inducer of death when you have a shotgun blast or a sucking chest wound, as Malcolm did. So it was almost like we got to make sure he doesn't survive this type of thing. But for me, even if I'm never clear on what happened or who did what, I am clear that the state wanted Malcolm and Martin and others like that gone, and has benefited more than anybody, the Nation of Islam didn't benefit anywhere near from Malcolm's death in the way that the state itself did and continues to. So, anyway, I just think that's important to note.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and things, and yeah, brilliant answer, and that's a perfect segue to yeah, that's a perfect segue to this question, which is I want to talk to you about black capitalism and black leftism, and so just answer this question: why is black capitalism not the answer to the plight of black Americans, or even indeed broad Latino and indigenous community in the U.S.? Why? Yeah. So go ahead and answer.
Well, I mean, my shortest, easiest answer is simply that even in a white supremacist imperial colonial situation, capitalism hasn't worked for all white people either. So the idea that if we put black in front of it and then say, go do it, that it's going to help black people as a collective is on its surface a non-starter. So I mean, there's capitalism is still capitalism, and for there, which requires exploitation. In extraction of wealth and land and labor, of resources, and I mean, the whole process is not one that is wealth creating for a collective. It accumulates wealth in a handful, and that's what we see in white communities and around the world at a greater degree than ever at this point. Another reason why it can't work is because it only exists as a popular concept because it's been encouraged and advocated by the state and its emissaries for 150 years as an explicit tactic to keep black people from organizing politically. So this whole thing of black entrepreneurialism and black business has, I mean, yes, on the one hand, there are examples of white vigilantes attacking black economic advance, but that's usually not the real issue, and not the final determinant in what destroys black economic advance. What destroys black economic advance is the overall system of capitalism, which requires a public policy apparatus that redirects the money-making process to certain areas of society, almost all of which are dominated by a handful of white, at this point, corporations. So, and particularly since the 1970s, it's been a hyper promoted and propagated concept among black people trying to find radical solutions to a collective problem. So that is specifically to say, let's redefine black power as black capitalism so that, as Nixon said himself, that Stokely Carmichael version of black power doesn't get adopted by the rest of the community. So I mean, whether it's just looking at how capitalism works as a social and economic model, or looking at the fact that black capitalism has been advocated and promoted by the state, by the white business community, as a way of distracting and controlling degrees of change in the society. That is, I guess, the shortest way I can explain and answer why it won't work. That it doesn't work for white people in a white society, and it's still capitalism. So why would it work for black people?
Well, what would you say to not to a black Democrat which just wants capitalism with a human face? What would you say to the odd black Republican who says, look, Jared, look, Dr. Ball, this is how we get the black people out. Pull themselves by the bootstrap, whatever it is, the stupid expression. This is how we get them out from poverty. We give tax cuts to every single black business. We give super tax cuts to the black entrepreneur, the nice record companies and stuff like that. And we subsidize their black businesses. That way they can grow and grow and grow, and they can hire as many black youth off the streets, yada yada yada. Yeah, what would you say to that?
Again, I mean, one, again, I would say the same thing in another way that I just said, that is not how wealth is created. That's not how white people got their wealth. And with all, again, the political power and the wealth in the world, white people still have not been able to solve problems of inequality and poverty within white communities. So the idea then that black people should be told to turn around and do something, and even what you said is often argued, and it's not just black Republicans. I mean, there are even black nationalists and people who consider themselves radical follow that same logic, and say that we have to get our money right, that we can get our politics right, or on some fanciful level they argue that we can get our money right and we don't need to engage white folks and we don't need to engage the broader society because we'll be good. And all of that is just a complete, I mean, it's really just a wild non-understanding of political economy, of how capitalism works, of how wealth is created. So even if you just follow the logic that was you just laid out from this black Republican, black people, actually my favorite stat that I learned in working with some others on some research last year is that from 1992 to 2012, black people created more than 2 million businesses. And in that same period, the amount of national revenue that was captured by those black businesses went down from 1% to 0.3%. So in other words, of all the money being spent in the nation on all businesses, the amount going to black businesses, even with a 2 million business increase, went down to 0.3%. Why is that? Well, several reasons. One, black people can't get investment or venture capital from venture capitalists and banks to expand their businesses. Black people don't have any money and collateral, don't have any wealth to get loans to start businesses. Black businesses are often one employee or less businesses. And when they have the ability to hire employees, don't generate enough revenue to pay them even what the average worker is paid in this society. They are relegated to the least money-making sectors of the economy, that is these black businesses. So they're not in manufacturing, they're not in military, industrial, whatever, complex work. They're in service things, they're in the gig economy, they're in beauty and barbershops, they're in, so to that point, their target audience, their customer base are poor black people. So if this is exactly what Malcolm used to say: you live in a poor neighborhood, you go to poor schools, get a poor education, get a poor job, stay poor. Even when you inject into that cycle this fantasy of tax abatements for business and this for business and support for this, that, it doesn't change anything, because all that's being funneled into that are poor black people. Same thing about black banks. Black banks cannot expand because black people don't have any money to put in those banks. Black banks can't increase their own wealth because they're dealing with small amounts of deposits from poor black people. They cannot then invest in the global market and get returns that they bring back to their poor black people, because those poor black people, by the fact of being black, even if you get a loan for a business or a home, the value of it plummets immediately just because it's black people. So that it doesn't provide the collateral you would need to get a big loan from a bank that you could then in fact pay back if you did get the loan. So it doesn't, so I mean, we could just keep going, but I mean, the point is people don't really follow it down. And then the last point really is that even when people try to solve the puzzle I just laid out, they can only do it for one or another individual or small segment. When we're really talking about, what I'm talking about is all of us, now, and which requires actual political power, actual control over the public policy apparatus, and the ability to determine not only what is wealth, but where it goes when it's created. That's what we need. And that's why we're constantly being told to endeavor in some or another black business or whatever, so that we never assume political power.
Fascinating, and that's a perfect segue then to that's a perfect segue then to this question, which is, can you talk about something Glen Ford and the team at Black Agenda Report advocated? Can you talk about what community control over the police means? And again, this is an idea that the late Glen Ford and the team at Black Agenda Report advocate, rather than just the quick fix solution, of defunding the police as a way of achieving abolitionism and racial social justice.
Honestly, I can't speak to too much about how Glenn and Bruce frame that, and this is one area that I'm honestly not an expert in. So I don't want to say too much other than, I just know that there's been a long history that I'm sure Glenn and Bruce were aware of attempts to have community review boards. I just don't remember the specifics of what they argued. I know they knew about all this stuff. But I don't know exactly what they were calling for in terms of defunding or abolition today. And honestly, I don't know exactly how I would want to lay out or explain my own views on it. I mean, I'm clear we need abolition. I'm clear we need defunding and redistribution of where resources go. But I've been moved by some of the arguments coming out of some cats that I whose work I follow in Baltimore, leaders of a beautiful struggle. And some of the issues that they raise is that some of the discussion around the country involving abolition doesn't take into account the actual lived experience of Black working people on the ground, and some of it is turned into a fundraising, a nonprofit fundraising sort of catchphrase that is, say, because it sounds good in some sectors to say we want abolition, but what does that really mean? So I know people talk about dual power. We have to have the ability to police ourselves while we're getting rid of these institutions. But I don't know. I can't speak on what Glenn and Bruce were saying, and I think my own thoughts are really not that clear on the subject either.
What would well, actually, don't be shy. I mean, you're a guest. How would if you were king of the world, how would you go about the issue of the issue of what Solomon Kamajan calls state terror? The racist police brutality which Black people, Indigenous people, and Latinos face constantly on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm not again, this is not about trying to be humble. It's about I'm honestly still trying to work out exactly what I think could happen in because I don't want to just fantasize. I'm trying to think in terms of some practical steps. But initially where I end up starting to think is in that issue of, okay, well, let's defund. Let's take the money out of the current institution. And then, so I like a lot of the arguments to say, well, we could just start, for certain issues. Obviously, you don't send a cop to something that you could send a social worker or a therapist to. And if we had more money going to that kind of work, so stuff like that. But really my point is when I want us to be thinking about, how do we have political power so that whatever policing apparatus is involved is beholden to a higher authority that we are either comprising in full or, equally a part of managing. So in other words, that's sort of my point. A lot of this could be made moot if there was real oversight, if there was real defunding, retraining, redistributing the energies and resources of those who engage in the police, things like I think about with teachers, double and triple the salaries and then double and triple the requirements and the rigor it takes to become these things. So if you really want to be a cop and get that nice salary to keep communities safe and calm and quiet, you got to go through a long series of, years of like it should be something like, we don't let people open up chest cavities and in our cranium to perform surgery on just like a couple months of, a boot camp and okay, here's a scalpel. So like policing and teaching should be, kind of like the same thing. You have to commit. I just saw a little documentary about somewhere in Scandinavia, I think in Finland, to be a teacher, like you're paid really well, but you got to go through like a lot, and the point is they want to make sure this is what you really want to do. And that you're not just, I'm not just teaching somebody's kids because, I got nothing else to do. And I'm not just, out here putting on a badge because I really hate Black people and I want to go kill somebody legally. No, if you really want to be a cop and a police officer is really here to keep peace, and then let's put them through multiple years of training, make sure their psyche and whatever is good, keep the gun, all kinds. Anyway, my point is I just want political power. So I don't really, I honestly, I don't know. Everything else starts to sound like a fantasy exercise, which is cool, but I don't think really gets to the heart of your question. So, but that's really what I want. So I'm trying to really listen and learn and catch up to a lot of the arguments around defund and abolition. But with the goal on, I want political power. I mean, I really think about what Kwame Ture used to say. I mean, I know he was somewhat being facetious, but he used to say, like, you can keep everything else. I just want the power. And like, that's really what, so I want us to be thinking about how are we organizing and moving to get that power? And that means we gotta, I think, do a lot of different things. We have to get off of the, cameras and stuff, and yeah. But I don't know. That's not a good answer. It's not a good answer. It's not me trying to be humble. It's that I just don't have it worked out. I don't have a good pat answer. And I think that, a lot of times when I hear people with really good sounding answers, they're coming out of like their latest PE session or their latest nonprofit training. And I don't think have had a chance necessarily to let it, marinate and try to, how is this going to work in real life? So I don't know. I don't want to be afraid of saying I don't know, and I don't know.
No problem. Well, that's while on the subject, I think one thing which would be wonderful is if we ended the drug war. And I'm just curious, where is Black Lives Matter and other Black advocacy organizations, or even the churches, in demanding at least an end to the drug war and radically reassessing how we treat addiction or recreational drug use? And where are even the voices calling to amend the Constitution and get rid of that loophole in the 13th Amendment? Because those are two things which overnight...
I don't hear any of that. Yeah, those are good questions. I don't hear anything about the 13th Amendment or even about legalization of drugs. Like, I don't hear that being raised as enough. I'm also not, I also, we have to be clear, I'm also not at this point close enough to a lot of on the ground work that people are doing. So I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing, but I'm not hearing anything about it. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was the first thing going back to those early years with Glen Ford that he and I disagreed on. And his point was practical, and at the time it was that, because, I'm a full advocate of total legalization of all drugs.
Yeah, me too.
And, I think everything should just be taxed, regulated, and everybody should be taken off the corners and given jobs in restyled pharmacies, making even more money with healthcare benefits. If you've been working on a corner slinging, you clearly know the business, and you can, do a legalized version of that in a regulated pharmacy or medicinal, whatever you want to call it. Or if we are in a society that's willing to do that, and then we're redistributing and political power is shifting, a lot of the social issues that really cause people to engage drugs in the first place would be taken care of. So you would see less drug use, less drug abuse, less need to criminalize, more funding and taxation, creating more funding, giving more people jobs. So I think it was great, but at the time, and I'm sorry to go, I lost my and went on a tangent, but Glen at the time was arguing, so this is the early 2000s, and Glen's argument was we can't advocate legalization because the Black community doesn't want that. So the Black churches don't want that. Their fears, the ravages of the drugs will, so his argument was tactically, we can't advocate that. Like, Black commentator couldn't advocate full legalization. And I still disagree with that. I just keep saying, no, we just need a better PR campaign. Let's just, explain. I mean, people can learn. I mean, anyway, but so I don't know what the state of all that is, other than, obviously the push for medicinal and more legalization of marijuana, which is just replicating in the legal drug space what's happening in the illegal drug space, where rich white folks are able to dominate and poor Black people are left out in the secondary economy. Yeah. Anyway,
but it's stunning that that more people aren't calling for that, given given Netflix has done over a dozen documentaries about how evil the drug war is, how racist the drug war is. And if you read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, she makes it explicitly clear that we need to end this drug war. We need to end the drug war.
Yeah,
war. But
part of like, well, one thing, this is the importance. Well, real quick, it's important that people, and I think people should all read Greg Thomas's classic critique of that book, which we actually have at imixwhatilike.org. Why people like why everyone likes the new Jim Crow so much, or something like that. And one of the points that he makes is that Michelle Alexander's book skips over all of the 60s and 70s and 80s radical anti-drug and anti-prison work conducted within the Black and liberation struggle. So she skips a lot of that. And my point in bringing that up is that this is the point I'm getting at, that by skipping that history in her work, it doesn't allow us, and this is a point Thomas brings up, it doesn't allow us to see or enough to I think recognize or see the broader social relationship and political relationship that Black people have to this country, that the drug war still to this day in some ways obfuscates. So in other words, as it was admitted just a few years ago, the Nixon administration only developed the drug war in exactly the same way that the Nixon administration developed the hyper propagation of Black capitalism as a solution to Black radical Black power. The Nixon administration promoted the drug war as an excuse to crush the Black radical movement and any other allies within society. So the point I'm getting at is that the drug war, it's not enough to just see the drug war as being being the cause of so many problems for Black people and something that needs to be gotten rid of. Of course, that's true. But the point that we have to be aware of is that we need the political power we need the political power that efforts like the war on drugs, promotion of Black capitalism, celebrity, and so many other things is meant to blunt and prevent and be a buffer against. In other words, I don't want us to get sidetracked by the ploy, by dealing strictly with the ploy and not recognizing why the ploy was deployed. Why was the drug war? Because they don't want us to have political power, because we were advancing in too threatening a direction in a way that might achieve actual political power for Black people. So they come up with a drug war in addition to other things. That's what I think so yes, the drug war should be ended. All drugs should be legalized, decriminalized, so on and so forth. But if we don't recognize the political purpose of the drug war, then something else will be brought along to replace it. Just as like what Frederick Douglass said about after the 13th Amendment, which is why when they made the movie about the 13th Amendment, Frederick Douglass wasn't even mentioned in the damn movie, because what he said in real life was, he had a fancy way of saying it, but what he said was, they will, if we don't pay enough of attention, slavery will be given a new skin like a snake or something like that. And that's exactly what happened. They gave us the 13th Amendment, told everybody they're free, and then have found new ways to re-enslave us and more, and make more money off of us today than they did when we were on a plantation. So
with prison labor and whatnot, yeah.
or just in general. I mean, even without prisons, the exploitation of Black labor, period, creates more wealth for those who own the economy than they were earning when they owned the economy and it was a slave economy. In other words, they're making more money now than ever.
In what other ways?
What do you mean?
Like in what other ways? Like apart from from like say Black people doing lots of sports like basketball or
Everything. No, but everything, every single thing. The money we paid for the internet connection we're using for this call, the money we paid for the computers we're using, the money, the taxes we're paying on whatever, the bills we're paying, the money we spend when we buy groceries, all of that is creating wealth. The relative low wages we all are paid. I mean, this is why you have I don't have the figures right in front of me, but this is why you have 1% of the world with 95% of the wealth. This is why you have 5 white men in the United States with more land than all of Black people combined. I mean, this is, and so they're like, cool, fine, we need to make an adjustment, get you off the plantation. You all are too rebellious anyway. You fight too much anyway. You've made it too difficult and dangerous anyway. So here's a 13th Amendment. And then we'll just, figure out some new things. Sharecropping, prison, low wages, keep you locked into the poorest sectors of the economy. And just as we were just talking about before, as Malcolm said, we'll put you in a poor neighborhood, go to a poor school, get a poor job, and your neighborhood stays poor. Here we are. I mean, it's, again, all of the material indicators, wealth divide, income divide, healthcare, mortality rate. I mean, everything shows that Black people are getting, are not improving at all, or the gap is getting worse. It's widening. So things are just getting worse and worse and worse. And we're less of a threat today. I'm not saying slavery was better. I'm not, but don't get me twisted. I'm just simply saying that we are less of a threat now, and they make more money now. So
yeah, exactly. And that's a perfect actually I'm gonna switch around the questions for a bit. And then I have to ask you about this, which is I wanted your thoughts on the whole identity politics versus versus the class struggle, and how do we chew gum and walk at the same time? And I know you probably have seen many leftists, and okay, let's not beat around the bush. White leftists, white male leftists, and sometimes even white female leftists. They'll say things like there's too much attention to identity politics. There's too much attention devoted to racism, to transphobia, to sexism, and what we need to do, what will really unite all of us, is if we all unite and we deal with institutional classism, the class struggle, and once we address that, once we address capitalism / institutional classism, then we'll be able to kill all the other, kill all the evil birds with one stone, like white supremacy, the patriarchy, or heteronormativity. And what's your response to that? And how would you how would you say, and yeah, how would you communicate with some of those leftists, again, white leftists, and say, no, guys, this is how we do it?
So my thing is, my joke is at least, I don't engage, this anyway. My joke response is okay, fine, do it. So, have your socialist revolution. I support that. Have a communist revolution. I support that. And then we'll have another level of struggle. I mean, obviously, I mean, once then it becomes clear that as Dr. King said, the inability for white people to become psychologically, how did he put it? They're not psychologically prepared to overcome their whiteness. That will become clear. Or in the process of trying to develop that socialist revolution, so I, so anyway, my joke is, just say to do it. Just have your socialist revolution. I support that, and then we'll see. And if you're right, I'll happily, say I was wrong, and we'll live happily ever after. But I suspect that there will still be other issues, and I suspect that there would be other forms of inequality that would pop up along lines of race. Because to King's point again, white people have never gone through a process of psychologically recorrecting as a collective the centuries-long development of anti-Blackness that comes along with colonialism, enslavement, imperialism. So, that's why I stop it. Let's have the socialist revolution, and then we'll, I don't think we need to carry out the next level of steps and arguments about what white people will and won't do. And what levels of proof we would need to have that won't be enough, because I think that's a good step to start with. So if you're that serious in proving us wrong, white folks, have your revolution, and we'll come along for the ride. And if in fact that takes care of all the other issues of gender and sexuality and race, great. I mean, again, I don't have to be right about that. Until then, I still think it's important that I mean, in all seriousness, one thing that white people really have not and cannot, I think, at this point fully appreciate is what these identities mean to non-white or the world majority people. Because for white people, their identity hasn't come with all the baggage of negativity and physical and violent abuse and exploitation, et cetera, and so forth. So the first thing I think of is when I hear white people say that, is that this is what makes me a nationalist. It's that I don't want to hear, and I don't want to have these arguments with white folks about, their racism. But it really is just, so anyway, so that's the one thing. So what they just have to be politely made to understand is that the world majority have a lot of work to do in redefining ourselves outside of colonial and white supremacist definition. So now I do think that there are, just like with everything, there are conservative and revolutionary approaches to these things. So there is, I think, a conservative identity politics that is played. And I don't just mean the stereotypical conservative narrow nationalists. I'm talking about the anti-radical virtue signaling and symbolic, cries of horror every time there is insufficient Blackness or womanness or I can't think of what's the antithesis of heteronormativity. When there is insufficient LGBTQ, there are conservative reactions to this that are meant to be just liberal. Hey, we just want more Black people in the CIA. We want more gay people in the military. We want more, like there is that. But usually what I try to,
and of course, we reject that kind of identity politics.
Yeah, right. So what I'm saying is,
and the whole identity politics that was used by both, not so much Obama himself, but the Obama cult followers, that once we have a Black president in the White House, we now live in a post-racial society, or once we have this Hillary Clinton in the White House, everything is going to be so, feminism is going to advance, completely ignoring their awful, plutocratic, views and their agenda. But yeah, that kind of identity politics, I don't. We're definitely not down.
The version I keep trying to advocate is that, like, all of us everybody has a sort of an identity crisis. I think everybody has a particular need to go through whatever we all have to go through as individuals or small collectives to get our identities clarified, defined along our own interests and needs, etc. But so the way I've been conceiving it, over the last few years, is that we all have this door we have to walk through, this identity door that we have to go through. We all got our issues, we all got our own, some issues are maybe more prevalent or severe than others, but everybody's got to go through this door. The point is, we got to go through the door and get into the other room, or into the space, or out into the space of political struggle. So as we go through these doors, we have to be, I think, finding the most radical, militant versions of whatever these identities are, and bring them into this other struggle. We can't just stay, I don't mean to, I'm thinking now of a closet. I don't mean to say stay in the closet, but I'm like, in other words, we can't just stay in that transition space. So I'm thinking of, what I tried to go through and learn many years ago, the whole process of the, going the negrescence process. The short of it is going from a version of having accepted the negative colonial definition of Blackness and redefining that into a militant radical Blackness. So whatever that is, whatever people's identity are, that's what we have to have. So in other words, we can't just have trans people becoming Caitlyn Jenner. Like that's not hot. That doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that doesn't help. Like whatever who, and I don't know if, and I don't know who the pantheon is or if it's been created yet, but whoever that trans pantheon of militant radical revolution, that's who they have to become. And that's who we all have to become as we go through our doors. Like, so that's, so we don't just become our own, versions of Caitlyn Jenner. We don't want to just be replicating whiteness and privilege and hostility and imperialism in a new identity. We don't want the rainbow. Remember that picture that was hot for a minute, the first all LGBTQ attack helicopter crew or something like that.
Exactly.
Some nonsense like that. What was that?
CIA member and whatnot, and or there was that commercial with someone who had like all of these different identities, and also was very open about like her struggles with mental health, and come join the CIA.
Right, because that's where all your mental health issues will be solved. As you create issues for everybody else. I guess that's what they need.
Exactly.
Satisfy your own mental health issues by creating many for others. Anyway, so yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to say. Like, and I feel like it there are moments where I do feel like sometimes we gotta get stuck in that moment of dealing with our identities. And I just want to help us all get pushed into that other side, or out into the other side of actual struggle. So anyway,
so a quick follow-up would be so if we ever run into that that situation with some of our comrades, some of our allies, or even when we're reading the odd white Marxist websites which complains about identity politics, complains about wokeness, and says we shall be uniting on class. I think I kind of like your response, which is like, okay, that's fantastic, good for you, but until then, since white supremacy,
but another way,
since white supremacy is or sexism is not high on your list of priorities, I'm going to be organizing, my people, my Black leftists, and of course, you can say that you can repeat the same thing with queer leftism or Marxist feminism and whatnot, right?
I mean, even as you were just saying that, I'm thinking, now how did oh man, it just was in my head. Because it was just like a really, I think a better, yeah, like if, I love Marx, and I think we should all read Marx, but part of what I might say to someone in the example you give is that, but part of what Marx was arguing is that we have to accept a new identity as a laborer or a working person or a communist. So on some level, that was part of the whole, I might start working with this, because that's part of the whole Marxist argument is people re-identifying themselves along lines of class. So that is a different kind of identity politics. So, I might say to that Marxist, like, you want me to play your identity politics, but you don't want to play mine. Yeah, I might see how that works, because I might have to let that give that a shot, because again, I mean, because that, I mean, isn't that maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, that seems what Marx ultimately is saying. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. So you have to first recognize your identity as a worker and in unison with other workers. That is identity politics of a different sort. But the point would be, now I'm just playing the thought argument game, and I'm saying, so my response to that would be, but that Marxist worker identity is the acceptance or the movement of that identity into that struggle. That is, in other words, that is the new, maybe that's what their response would be. I don't have to think about that. I have to play that out like a game of chess.
Yeah.
Because if I say that, then they could just say no, because once you've accepted the identity as a Marxist and a communist or a working person, you are already into that other struggle. You've gone through the identity door. Oh man, I don't know. Anyway, this is good. This is great. This is great.
Well, I'll be let me know when you do an episode about that on Black Power Media. I'll make sure to watch the live stream.
Yeah, just me talking to myself and answering my own questions. I'm sure that'd be great.
It shouldn't. Yeah. I think it shouldn't be as difficult. But yeah, because like I am of the left, but at the end of the day, just because just because a large majority of white workers, for example, got better, got the New Deal, or before that they got the progressive era and stuff like that. That's all great, but who was left out of that? Latinos were left out of that. Black people were left out of that. And of course, Native Americans, I mean, are they even considered a class? Because they're just brutally just like excluded, from all of that on the reserves. And yeah, so that's why so that's why I start getting red flags when I hear when I hear some leftists, white leftists, complain about identity politics and or complain about wokeism, and so many, of course, so many of the right wing are the ones that are complaining about that, and that's just like my red flag. Like, okay, all right, yeah, you like you said, you can have your revolution. In the meantime, I'm going to be taking care of like my the marginalized people who aren't being met because it's too much for you guys, right?
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
All right.
Or just tell them to read Fanon. That's it. You go read Fanon.
And I'm almost done with my questions. I have to ask this one because you are great when it comes to the subject of American rap hip hop music, and I want to ask, do you share the view that the once popular dominant form of rap, gangster rap, do you share the view that it glorifies violence, and that rap at large does glorify misogynistic sexism, machismoism, violent masculinity? Because I know, because I know rap by the late 2000s, we had an overkill of what was called, bling bling rap. Rappers who were talking about, how rich they are thanks to the rap game, they're in. And, it's almost like, kind of be careful what you wish for, because gangster rap, while I do see, the arguments that it does, glorify violence, it at least, though, highlighted these are the terrible, conditions, Black people are living under. And it was sort of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't talk about what's happening in the hoods, people say, oh, you're just promoting hedonism and having a great sex life. But then but now we're at a stage where there's hardly any gangster rap. There's definitely not so much rappers that are talking about the issues that we've just been having a discussion. And yeah, so I just wanted to, so what's your views on all of that in general?
Well, I mean, I guess the shortest way I can answer is that really first of all, nothing becomes popular without the will and acceptance of corporations, which are themselves just the well, as Robert Reich just said, the legal fictions that allow people to rule in anonymity. So um, so I was, you know, when talking about hip hop or propaganda more broadly, my argument is usually to start with always that I'm less interested in what people argue as the specific impact of the art or propaganda or messaging. I'm more interested in the intent of those producing and dominating the control over the dissemination of those messages. And from that perspective, even from day one, hip hop, well, from the first commercial rap track with Sugar Hill Gang, the hip hop has been a commercial product controlled and put to the service of elite corporations, themselves subsidiaries of larger international conglomerates and venture funds and et cetera and so forth. And therefore, you know, again, long story short, there's much more to fill in there, but long story short is that the final product that is disseminated and distributed has to be something that those owners approve of. So whether NWA coming out impacted me as a teenager and made me want to be more violent, I don't know. I personally think yes, it did, but it doesn't matter. Even if I'm wrong, the point I would be wanting us to focus on is that the goal of those in power was to flood the audience that it was seeing was growing for hip hop with messages that are conducive to those who rule this society in the world, which is hyper commercialism, violence directed at the community itself, you know, a marginalization or a full suppression of radical or even just sort of thoughtful content. And then by today, I mean, I'm teaching a class this semester on hip hop, and you know, my students, through no fault of their own, I mean, they don't know the four elements, they don't know any of the basics of the history, they have no understanding of how the industry works, how popularity is generated. They don't understand why the music they listen to, why the beat production that they hear today is different from what I grew up on, and it is not just an issue of generational change. It has everything to do with corporate interference, law, copyright, intellectual property. All of this has been involved over the last couple of decades to literally change everything about the art, except one, at least one major point, which is that the colonized Black and brown people produce it, and the elite international white owners make all the money from it. So that's why, you know, with the tens of billions of dollars that hip hop has generated since the early 70s, the South Bronx, where they say hip hop started, is worse off today than it was in the early 70s. It's poorer today.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, so it's like, so again, I mean, so anyway, yeah, that's, I mean, that's my shortest answer, but, for those of us of a certain age, again, how does Lee or Cohen go from ruining hip hop and Def Jam to now running YouTube's music, the biggest music outlet in the world? What change has occurred? The guy that has been ruining hip hop for decades has now more power. It's like, wait a minute. So anyway, I mean, so, and then the popular product, which is always very different than the mass amounts of the product of the art that is produced outside of the commercial world. Most of it is, I don't know if it's as hyper violent as some of the stuff that I grew up on even, but it's certainly not more thought provoking,
Yeah.
It's still.
I think nowadays rap music, I think one of the sad things not having gangster gangster rap is that at least regardless of whether of whether it did engage in glorifying violence and whatnot, but at least it did shine a light into the horrible living conditions of the Black population in the U.S. Whereas nowadays, I mean, rap music. I think nowadays my problem with rap is that there's just not enough diversity as there once was in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s were for every, gangster rap G-funk, there was, some interesting stuff coming out of, there was something like a Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, the Fugees, Wu-Tang Clan. And and with all of that, you also had your bling bling rap like Cash Money, which nowadays makes unlistenable music, and Ja Rule and the Rough Riders.
But
that diversity just doesn't exist anymore, and it's mostly
Well, the reason I'm hesitating to agree is that the industry at the time you're talking about, I think, was going through its own identity crisis. If we could continue that comparison, that those in power are not all perfect, mystical superpower, whatever. They still have to make adjustments and figure things out. So once it was clear that rap wasn't going anywhere and hip hop wasn't in general going anywhere, there was a moment where and it took a few years for the colonial apparatus to reorganize itself. So in that moment, I would argue, is when you're talking about, not only did you have the golden era, so-called, in the 90s, but into the early 2000s, you still had this popularly disseminated diversity. I mean, even in the late 90s and early 2000s, when Black Star and Dead Prez and all of them were coming out, there was like, oh wow, we might, it might be hot again, it might be, we might have another moment. But the industry just had to finish reorganizing itself to the point where I think now you don't get any of that promoted, to your point, but the art is still there. There are still people making in this country and around the world a lot of great hip hop and art that isn't damaging, but it's just harder to find, oddly enough, despite all the internet and all of the other stuff. It's just harder to find because what is promoted with greater ease now more than ever. And this was the argument I used to have in the late 90s and through the 2000s, as the internet was growing. A lot of people in the rap world and elsewhere were assuming that the internet was going to level the playing field. It was going to make, artists not need the industry anymore. Napster came out and everybody's like, oh, it's about to be over, and then here we are. And I was like, hold up. Now I said, they're going, I didn't use this language because we weren't in this conversation then, but I was saying more or less, look, they're just going through their identity change, but they're not going through a political shift. So their identity change isn't really going through the door. I'm talking about into political struggle. They're already clear about their struggle. So their identity change is to become Caitlyn Jenner. In other words, they, you know what I mean? That's my point. Like, they're like, oh, even Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the biggest, most powerful venture capitalist hedge fund or whatever in the world, he sent out a note to all the people that want his money, which is every major corporation. I mean, BlackRock is the dominant institutional investor in everything from Amazon to Netflix to Alphabet to Google to everything. And he said, look, I know you all want our money. We control over $9 trillion in capital. We're I mean, that's damn near half the US GDP. This is run by one company. And his point was, but we see that the world is responding and they want diversity and they want woke and they want, so he said, if you want my money, you better have an environmentalist plan in your corporate write-up. You better have some Black and gay people in your, he wasn't saying make real change. He was just saying, put on your Caitlyn Jenner and then call yourself trans and a minority and an oppressed, and you're cool with everybody, when in reality, you're still white and still wildly conservative and still, looking to do the same stuff you were doing before. So that's what the music industry was doing. They were saying, look, we can't fully get rid of the thoughtful music yet. Let's wait a few years. Let's catch up to the new technology. Let's see what happens as we respond to Napster and respond to the new digital environment. And now what do you have? You have again, a handful of elite corporations dominating the digital music and digital environment entirely, the music companies entirely. They're still able to control and determine who becomes famous. The only people that we sometimes hear noise from that are critical of that are people who had already made their money. So if Taylor Swift or Kanye steps out and says something a little different about their relationship to the music industry, well, they're already in a position to do that. Like, back in the day, one of my favorite, of course, was Prince. I mean, Prince could take the stance against the music companies that he took because he was already super famous. Like,
yeah.
Not everybody else can do that. Not everybody can write slave on your face and change your name to a symbol and still be the baddest man on the planet. That's only Prince. But everybody else is still struggling either to sign a contract and give their life away or try to hustle, an end run. Anyway, so my point, a long answer, but the point is they were just going through their identity crisis, and today they're able to manage more than ever through the same processes of payola that is paying to determine who becomes famous, most known. All of that still is at play with your Spotify lists and iTunes placements and your YouTube algorithms. All of that is based on advertising, record label investment, and payment. And if you aren't promoted, you might get out there and do something, but that's always been the case. You get out there, hustle your mixtapes back in the day. You might make more money than a signed artist. But look, I just saw an interview with Bun B today. One of his brand new interviews he gave with somebody in Atlanta, and Bun B, he said something. He said a version that I've said, a whittled down. So my line is always, you can't be rich, famous, and radically political at the same time.
Yeah.
It's never happened before. There's never been an exception. There is no even exception to the rule. There is none. Once you become one of those three, or you might become two of those three. But if you try to add that third piece, something happens. There's deaths, careers ruined, something happens. So Bun B said just today, he was trying to talk about, people faking like they're rich and as opposed to how truly rich people move. And he was saying that you can't be, his argument was you can't be, he said to the artist's dilemma today is you could either be rich and unknown or famous and broke. So you sign the contract and get famous, but that contract's going to take all your money. Or you can sell and stay independent and you're not going to be as famous or famous at all, but you're going to make more money. Now, he didn't do the radical political part because that's, as I'm saying, off the table, and he probably even knows that too. And that's what those in power have always understood, and that's how the industry addresses itself to Black people in particular, and hip hop specifically. That you can be over 50 in hip hop if you're Jay-Z and Snoop, and you're still saying the same dumb stuff you've been saying since you were 20. It's a slightly more sophisticated version, but it's still the same thing. Snoop has, it's still the same thing. Less violent maybe, but it's still smoking weed, crip dancing, chasing women. Jay-Z is still finding a new way to tell you, I'm richer than you. I had drug money before you, and now I'm still richer than you, and my wife's prettier than you, and my babies are better than you. It's the same thing. So there is no, there's no, hey, I'm now in my 50s and I really understand how the economy works, and this is what we really need to do. You can't do that. Then your fame is going to go away. So that's why, anyway, so I don't know. I think, again, I'm just rambling. It's past my bedtime.
Okay, well, we're almost done. Actually, the next time I have to have you on, we actually should talk about how the music industry, if you ever wanted to become a Marxist and really hate capitalism, the music industry, oh my gosh, tops the list of just how evil and exploitative that for-profit at all expense is. And no, you're spot on. Although I do have to say, in defense of Snoop Dogg, I really did love his album Bush, and I really did love Reincarnation, his kind of reggae album.
Sure. My point is, I'm not saying that the music is bad. I'm not even saying that these folks are not talented. I'm just saying there's no growth. like, you know, I mean, one of the things I've learned about as I've gotten older is that I don't think it's just a generational thing automatically that makes old people not listen to what young people are listening to. One, there's some interference of the industry that separates people with genres and all that. But the other thing is just that I'm, you know, at 50, I don't, how much more do I need to hear 20-year-olds talking about getting laid? The song might be hot, but after a certain moment, I mean, it's like, okay, enough already. How many more first dates and you know, all this do I have to listen to? At a certain point, I'm either going to listen to the music I grew up listening to, or that I've listened to, or I want to hear somebody my age saying something about my reality. And when a 50-year-old rapper gets on there, I don't, that's not true. I mean, Jay-Z talks about his kids and being an adult a little bit more now, but I mean, but it's still more or less the same thing.
Yeah,
He's just talking about putting his kids in diamonds.
Jay-Z's a super black capitalist on top of that, and there's so much I find, you know, detestable about both him and Beyonce, but we're gonna save that for another time.
But I like a lot of the music, though, is my point. That's all. I like the music. It's just not radical. It's not.
All right. Well, Jared. Jared. Just before I let you go and enjoy a very good, happy weekend, which you enjoy. Just needs that. Yeah, I'm gonna get into this. Finally, we end the program with the Marcel Proust Bernard Pivot questionnaire that my hero James Lipton would do for the Inside the Actor Studio. I cannot wait for this. So, Jared.
Oh, wow.
What is your?
That's a hell of a reference. I used to like that show too. Sorry, go ahead. What's the question?
Yeah, exactly. So Jared, what's your favorite words?
My favorite words?
Yeah, favorite word. Favorite word.
My favorite word?
Yeah.
I want to say revolution, but I'd probably have to say dope. I say dope more than anything. That's dope. I just like that word.
What's your least favorite word?
Oh man, the B word. I hate that word even more than the N word for some reason. You mean
the B word that rhymes with which?
Yes. I really hate that word. I hate it. I really hate it. And I want to say I hate it. Honestly, I mean, I really hate how it's directed at women. But I suspect that I probably also hate it more than anything because that latent patriarchy, when a man calls another man that, there's this old documentary I used to use called The N-Word, and Ice Cube had a line in it. He was interviewed for it, and he said, you know, if you call me the N-word, yes, whatever, but if you call me a B, you know, it's going to be a problem. And I remember thinking in all these years, I was like, you know what, I think that's true. I mean, I think for some reason, and it's that patriarchal thing, that manhood thing. But for all the, anyway, for whatever reasons, good or bad, the B word I hate more than anything. I really hate that word.
Yeah, I also have a problem with words like slut and the the C word because it's just used so easily just to, you know, shoot a woman down. And as a feminist, I can't be down with that.
Actually, it's weird. Other than like in a movie, I've never heard in real life. I don't think I've ever heard, particularly Black people, I've never heard anyone use the C word. I've just never heard it.
It's a very British thing, but it's
bizarrely
used as a word of endearment. But
right.
All right.
Yeah.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Man. What turns me on? I don't even know how to answer that. I don't know that there.
Students, being a teacher.
Oh, I see. I guess, yeah. I do love teaching. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, that's a really, I don't know. I'm really stuck on that one. I really do. I mean, you know, look, I am, you know, I'm an incredible, like a serious music lover. So like music, I guess, if that would suit this. Music, I guess, I don't know. I don't think that's a good answer, but I don't think it doesn't rise to the level of the question, but I don't know.
And what turns you off?
Anti-intellectualism. I have to admit, I'm kind of bougie with that. I need thinking people around me. And it doesn't necessarily mean rich or in a university setting either. I found my favorite intellectual moments have been with a bottle on a corner, but I need it. And I don't, so even if we're sitting on a corner drinking, you got to be a thinking person.
Otherwise, got to be street smart.
Years ago, I mean, this is really retrograde. I mean, I admit it, but years ago, you know, and this would solidified it. I was in a working situation with a woman that was as physically attractive as, you know, people get, but the complete absence of intellectualism made her ugly to me. I mean, like, I didn't want to be around her. And that was one of the first moments, years ago, but it was one of the first moments where I realized, oh, wait, I think you can't just be pretty. Like, you can't, I can't take
gotta be two for the price of one.
Because I was like, I was even at the time, I was like, objectively, she's gorgeous, but I can't stand her. And, you know, I can't stand being around her because she just didn't want to think. She wasn't out of thinking. She was just, you know, you know, she wasn't moved in that way. And it was such a complete turnoff. So yeah, that would be it right there.
All righty. What sound or noise, actually, yeah, what's your favorite curse word? What's your favorite curse word?
Oh, my favorite curse word. Probably motherfucker.
Yeah.
That's the one that comes. Everything and everybody is a motherfucker. That motherfucker there, boy. That's probably it. Yeah.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, the boom bap. I was going to say any drum, but that I am of the boom bap generation, since we were talking about hip hop, and that DJ Premier style production, that Pete Rock production. But honestly, anything, like if I hear anybody on any drums really, but a trap set, somebody getting down in any kind of genre, I'm instantly locked in. And when I go see live music performed, if it's hip hop, I want to be able to see the DJ, because I like, that's what and if it's a live band, I got to be able to see the drummer. I got to have a shot at it. That's, otherwise I'm never fully happy. I don't have to see anybody else in the band. If I can watch the drummer, I'm good. I'll sit there all night. I love it.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
I mean, obviously there are easy ones, like, you know, whatever, but the sound for this conversation, the sounds I hate are sounds of liberalism.
The Obamas
really
of
gross.
The world, the Obamas and the Cory Bookers of the world, those windbags.
Yeah, give me a good racist hate speech before you give me some soft milquetoast liberalism. I cannot stand it. I'd rather be called the N-word all day than hear somebody give me another, well, we can, work harder and vote for the next, Biden and like, oh no, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, And what profession, if you weren't doing yours, would you like to attempt to do? So if you weren't a teacher, if you weren't a journalist, if you weren't the brilliant,
a professional,
you are.
A professional drummer. Like, if I was a real drummer, if I could have made a living playing drums.
All right. And what profession would you absolutely not ever want to do under any circumstances?
Anything that has me in an office all day. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter what the salary is. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. The number one reason why,
one of those white collar jobs, like, yeah.
It doesn't matter. I mean, the number, honestly, the number one, I think, looking back, I think the number one reason why I wanted to be a professor was the flexibility in the schedule. And there's no, I mean, I have an office, but I don't have to be in there all day. So that was like, I can't do it. Those jobs are horrible. Horrible.
All righty. And the final one. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever is the afterlife that you believe in, or even don't believe in?
You know what I want? You know what I want her to say? I want her to say, I got a fat one rolled up for you, and I got a big, big glass of Uncle Nearest on ice waiting for you. That's what I want. That's not all I want her to say, but that's what I want. That's the first thing. Got a fatty rolled, and I got you a glass waiting for you. Now go have a seat and welcome.
All right. Well, we were joined tonight with Dr. Jared Ball of African American and African Diaspora Studies at Morgan State University at Baltimore, Maryland. He was once a correspondent for the Real News Network, but you can find him doing his program I Mix What I Like and a host at the Black Power Media. He's also the author of the book, The Myth and Propaganda of the Black Buying Power. I'll put a link to all of those and other things where you can explore Jared Ball. Jared, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to have you back on. I hope to have you back on in the future and have you as a regular. It was an honor to have you on, especially because it's Black History Month. And I'm also going to link to my twice past guest and my good friend Solomon Kamajan's documentary about hip hop. You are one of the people that's interviewed in that. So
right on. Yeah. No, thank you very much. It's been an honor. And if I can make one request going forward, if you're going to refer to anything I've done in the past, let's leave off the Real News Network. That was and I don't mind you leaving this into the video either. That was whack experience. That outfit is whack. And if anything, let's be reminded of the time I spent working with Glen and Bruce at Black Agenda Report. That's definitely what I prefer.
And people should definitely donate generously to Black Agenda Report, but also to Black Power Media, where Jared does his work. So thank you so much, and you have a fantastic weekend.
You too. Peace, my man. Thank you.